Hello and welcome to Freedom Watch. I'm Judge Andrew Napolitano here defending freedom, defending your natural rights, and defending your right to have a government that stays within the confines of the Constitution. Dr. Rand Paul is running for the Senate in Kentucky, and polls currently suggest he'll do well in his primary against the hand-picked Republican establishment candidate, Secretary of State Trey Grayson. However, we've just received word here on Freedom Watch that today, United States Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, the other senator from Kentucky, is endorsing against Rand Paul and in favor of Mr. Grayson. Rand Paul has his own big-name supporters, however, including retiring Senator Jim Bunning, former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin, Steve Forbes, and evangelical leader Dr. James Dobson, who says he was earlier duped by misinformation from Republican leaders into opposing Dr. Paul, but now supports him. Despite having support from major conservative figures, Rand Paul goes farther than most conservatives in calling for a smaller government and a return to constitutional principles. This raises some interesting questions about exactly what form of big government we're currently living under anyway. Many of President Obama's harshest critics have used the word socialist to describe the president. But Rand Paul's father, Congressman Ron Paul, recently stirred some debate by saying that the president is not a socialist, rather he's a corporatist. The term connotes well-connected companies with ties to the government, including insurance and big pharma, who had such a hand in helping to shape health care reform. But the term corporatist also has been used to describe Mussolini's vision of a society in which all things are within the purview of the state, a single corporate governmental entity. Remember, the health care bill wasn't for health care. It was a bill to force Americans to purchase health care or to pay a fine. Dr. Paul, of course, is a physician who can no doubt shed some light on this topic for us. Dr. Rand Paul joins us now from Kentucky. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Good to be with you, Judge.
I have to start out by saying that as soon as Mitch McConnell, the majority leader of the United States Senate and one of the two senators from Kentucky, announced that he was endorsing your opponent, your lead over your opponent increased by 3 points. Almost as soon as he revealed that he was going to make the announcement. So much for his ability to influence people to vote against you.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether we should be unhappy or thankful that the leaders in the establishment are supporting my opponent. Congress currently has about a 16% approval rate. So when established figures in Congress support my opponent, I think maybe we should thank them.
I think you're probably right. Right now, a week outside of the primary, you're leading him by 18 points. Yesterday, you were leading him by 15 points. Dr. Paul, what does the Republican establishment fear about you? What are they afraid of if a small government, Barry Goldwater, Ronald Reagan constitutionalist is elected to represent the good people of Kentucky?
Well, I think they fear that I point out the hypocrisy of Republicans who are for lowering taxes but will also bring home the bacon. I don't think they go together. We as Republicans, we run and we say limited government's what we stand for, but we get to Washington, or many Republicans do, and they vote to cut your taxes, but they also come to your town and say, what federal project, what federal money can I bring you? What can I earmark for you? And I think that contradiction doesn't work. And people in the Tea Party have gotten wind of this, and I say that the Tea Party is equal parts chastisement to both parties for failing on the debt and for exploding the debt.
You're not telling me that Republicans who vote to cut taxes also continue to spend, are you? Do they not understand that the cash has to come from somewhere to pay back the bills?
Yeah, and I think what people in the Tea Party realize is that I think we're at a tipping point in our country where it may get to the point where the debt is unmanageable, and that not only is it our kids and grandkids that will pay for this debt, it may be this generation that struggles with a debt that becomes so unmanageable that the only way we can pay for it is by printing more money, and that can lead to catastrophe too, particularly for those on fixed income and those of low wage earners. If you take away the value of their dollar, they're going to be left in a really bad state.
Now, in full disclosure, you and I have been friends for a while, and your dad and I have been friends for years, and I've been a friend of your family. And I know you and your father and your family, and I know of your strident, ardent, pro-life views. How is it that somehow somebody like Dr. James Dobson was duped into thinking that you were not pro-life? Thankfully, he learned of this, but how did it happen?
Well, interestingly, this whole campaign, my opponent has basically just misled the entire state of Kentucky and said that I'm pro-choice, and all of his literature indicates that, and it's never been my position. But I guess it's my point of view that you can't lie forever without it catching up to you. And there was an OBGYN that I met in Lexington recently at a pro-life speech, and it was the day that the endorsement had come out against me, and he said, I know Reverend Dobson, and I'll call him and tell him what your real position is. Then I had a personal conversation with Reverend Dobson, and he was upset that people had lied to him about my position, and it's unusual for someone to change an endorsement so quickly, but we were very proud to get his endorsement.
Well, lies always catch up to you, and whoever perpetrated them, I'm glad it hasn't worked. I'm glad it hasn't worked for them. Is your opponent, by the way, I know this sounds absurd. This sounds like something from New Jersey. Is your opponent still in charge of counting the ballots in his own race against you?
Yeah, we asked him to recuse himself. We thought it was a fairly innocent thing to ask that he not count the votes in his own election. There have been many examples. I mean, look at Florida in 2000, where the Secretary of State finally ends the election, or it ends the first stage of the election by signing their certificate, and she was the chairman for Bush. Many states, including there was a commission, a Baker-Carter commission, that said, really, we should have nonpartisan officials looking over the elections, because really, would you want the county chairman or the statewide chairman for Bush to overlook an election, or the statewide chairman for Obama to oversee the election? Makes no sense. Recently in Georgia, the Secretary of State, who's a Republican down there, she resigned her office so she could run for governor because she said it wouldn't be fair for her to count the votes.
Well, it'd be nice if Mr. Grayson would have the same ethical sensibilities that she does as well. What are the issues still most on the minds of Kentucky voters? They've been listening to you for a long time. They've been listening to Mr. Grayson. You have an 18% lead. What resonates with them?
The debt, and that the Republican Party needs to be true to its principles. I've said from the very beginning, in Republican picnic after Republican picnic, when we were in charge, we doubled the debt. When we were in charge, we doubled the size of the Department of Education. When we were in charge, we orchestrated buying of the banks. I tell people that, look, the Republican platform says we don't believe in bailing out failed businesses, much less owning them. And then I'll follow that by saying, look, many of your Republican leaders, even some from Kentucky, voted for this bank bailout. And if they were standing here and you asked them, why did you vote for this? They would say, oh, well, I just thought they were going to buy the troubled assets. Our next question should be to every one of them, why didn't you read the bill? So a lot of this about the Tea Party is read the bills. Have a waiting period. They say they want me to wait to buy a gun. I tell them they need to wait to pass legislation. Point out where each bill has authority from the Constitution. These are all reform things that emanate from the Tea Party.
Your father once proposed legislation that would require all other legislation to articulate where in the Constitution is authority for the Congress to do that. And Speaker Pelosi wouldn't allow there to be a vote on something as simple and basic as that. Hopefully you'll get a chance to introduce it into the Senate.
It's coming. We're going to have a Tea Party platform that's going to be part of my platform after the primary, and we're going to nationalize this election and others to say, what does the Tea Party represent and what can we do at the national level?
Rand Paul, thank you for joining us on Freedom Watch.
Thank you, Judge.
From New York, defending freedom. Until the next time, stay free, America.